Welcome to Cheater Confessions. Let's get started with today's story. I never thought I'd hear my own wife talk about me like that. We were at a house party, one of those gatherings where everyone drinks too much and talks too loud, hosted by our old college friend Jason. Betty had been excited about it all week, reminding me at least 5 times to make sure I got off work early. She used to love these kinds of social events, dressing up, catching up with friends, letting loose for a night. But lately, things had been different. For the past year, our marriage had felt more like an arrangement than a relationship. The warmth we used to have, the long conversations, the random laughter, the physical closeness, had slowly faded. I didn't want to admit it, but I felt it. We still lived together, still shared a bed, still went through the motions of being husband and wife. But something was missing. And tonight I was about to realize just how much had already slipped away. Jason was telling a story about his latest disaster at work. People were laughing, drinks were being poured, and music pulsed in the background. I wasn't drinking much, just nursing a beer, half listening to Jason while scanning the room. Betty, on the other hand, was throwing them back like she was trying to drown something. I watched as she moved through the crowd, comfortable, effortless, the way she used to be when we first met. She was fully engaged in conversations, laughing easily, her cheeks flushed from the alcohol. She looked happy, but not with me. I wasn't even on her radar. At some point I found myself sitting on the couch, caught up in a surface-level conversation with Jason. He was talking about a new project at work, something about how his boss was impossible. But I wasn't really paying attention. And then it happened. From across the room I heard her. "So, how's married life treating you?" It was Tanya, one of Betty's closest friends, someone who had been there since our college days. And Betty laughed loudly. She waved her hand in a careless, almost dismissive gesture. "Oh, please," she said, rolling her eyes. "At this point, Matthew is just my roommate." A slight pause. Then some nervous chuckles from the group, the kind of laughter people force out when they're not sure if what was just said is actually funny. Tanya gave an awkward smile and took a sip of her drink. Someone else tried to change the subject, but I didn't hear what they said, because I wasn't moving. Just my roommate. The words struck me like a slap to the face. I stared at her, half expecting her to look over at me, to notice my reaction, to realize what she had just said. But she didn't. She was still smiling, still laughing, still talking like nothing had happened. I replayed the words in my head, over and over, as the noise of the party faded around me. At first I told myself maybe I had misheard. Maybe it was the alcohol talking, just a stupid joke she hadn't thought through. But no. I knew Betty. This wasn't a slip-up. This was how she really felt. I felt my fingers tighten around my beer bottle, my jaw clenched slightly. I glanced around. No one was looking at me. No one had turned to see if I had heard, because they all assumed I already knew. And maybe that was the worst part. Was this how she talked about me when I wasn't around? Had she already told them I was nothing more than a person who shared her space, her bills, her bed, but not her heart? I wasn't sure what was worse, hearing those words for the first time or realizing that she had probably said them before. I didn't react. I didn't storm over there and demand an explanation. I didn't make a scene. I just sat there, the weight of those words settling into my chest like a heavy stone. Betty kept talking, kept laughing, kept being the life of the party. But for me, the party was over. The rest of the night blurred together in a haze of noise and meaningless conversations. I went through the motions, nodding when someone spoke to me, forcing a small smile when necessary, even letting out a laugh or two when the moment called for it. But inside, something had shifted. I started watching her, really watching her. She leaned into conversations with everyone but me, fully engaged, fully present. When she laughed, tossing her head back, her eyes shone with amusement. She had a way of making everyone in that room feel like the most interesting person in the world. Everyone except me. She barely looked at me all night. And when she did, it was only in passing, just a glance, never lingering, never with the warmth she once had. And it hit me. Had it always been like this? Had I just been too blind to see it? For months, maybe even longer, I had felt the distance between us growing. At first I ignored it, told myself it was just life, work stress, routine, exhaustion. But it wasn't just that. There had been little moments, like the way she would shift away slightly when I put my arm around her, the way she stopped kissing me goodnight, claiming she was too tired. The way she seemed more invested in scrolling through her phone than in anything I had to say. And then tonight, she said it out loud. She had confirmed what I had been too afraid to admit. I felt like an idiot sitting there, watching her move through the crowd like nothing had happened, like she hadn't just crushed whatever was left of my hope for us. By the time we got home, the buzz of the party had worn off, but Betty was still giggling at something on her phone as she kicked off her heels. She swayed slightly, still tipsy, still lost in whatever world she was living in. Meanwhile, I stood in the doorway watching her, waiting for some kind of acknowledgement. A glance, a comment, anything to show she realized what she had said. But nothing. She just went about her routine, putting her phone down, stretching, walking toward the bathroom, like nothing had happened. I clenched my jaw, my hands tightening into fists at my sides. I wasn't going to let this slide. "Do you even hear yourself?" My voice came out calm. Too calm. Betty turned, frowning. "What?" "At the party," I said, stepping forward. "You called me your roommate." She blinked. There was a second of hesitation, just one, but it was enough. She remembered. Then, she rolled her eyes, like I was the one making a big deal out of nothing. "Oh my God, Matthew," she groaned. "That was just a joke." I let out a slow breath. A joke. That's what she was going with. "A joke?" I repeated, tilting my head slightly. "Because you didn't sound like you were joking." She sighed, running a hand through her hair. "You're being dramatic." There it was. That casual dismissal. The same way she brushed off everything I tried to talk about. The same way she ignored the problems we had. She was so comfortable in this version of us. The one where I just accepted whatever scraps of affection she decided to throw my way. The one where I stayed, no matter how lonely I felt. I took another step forward. "No, Betty," I said, voice steady. "I'm being honest. And I need you to be too." For the first time that night she hesitated. Her arms crossed, her weight shifting slightly like she suddenly didn't want to have this conversation. She could brush me off at the party. She could ignore my presence there. But now, in the quiet of our own home, she had nowhere to hide. I searched her face for something, remorse, regret, even just a flicker of understanding. But all I saw was irritation. She didn't want to deal with this. With me. And that pause, that hesitation, said everything. I wanted her to say it wasn't true, to tell me she didn't mean it. More than anything, I wanted her to fight for us. But instead, she just looked annoyed. "Matthew, can we not do this right now?" she muttered, rubbing her temples. "Right now? This has been going on for a long time," I shot back. "You barely talk to me anymore. We barely touch. We don't laugh like we used to. And now you're telling your friends that I'm just your roommate?" She exhaled sharply. "You're blowing this out of proportion." "No, Betty," I said, shaking my head. "I think I've finally seen things clearly." She didn't say anything. And in that silence I knew. I had been fighting for something that only I cared about. That night I didn't sleep. Betty, of course, fell asleep right away, curled up on her side of the bed, her back to me. That was how she always slept now, like she was putting a physical barrier between us, a silent confirmation of the emotional distance that had been growing for months. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, listening to the sound of her breathing, steady and unbothered. She wasn't thinking about what she had said. She wasn't replaying the night in her head, questioning how it had made me feel. No, she had brushed it off as a joke, rolled her eyes, and gone to bed as if nothing had happened. Meanwhile, I was wide awake, feeling like my entire marriage had just been laid out in front of me in a way I couldn't ignore anymore. Was this what marriage was supposed to be? Just coexisting? Two people sharing the same space, sleeping in the same bed, but living completely separate lives? No. I thought back to how we used to be, staying up late, talking about everything and nothing. The way she would reach for me in the middle of the night, half asleep but instinctively pulling me closer. Back then, I felt like I was a part of her world, not just someone she happened to live with. When had that changed? Had it been gradual, little pieces falling away over time? Or had she checked out all at once and I was just too blind to see it? I turned my head and looked at her. She was deep in sleep, completely at peace, completely unaffected. And that's when I knew. I was the only one holding on to something that was already gone. She had already moved on, maybe not physically but emotionally. She had already made her choice. She had just never bothered to tell me. By morning, my decision was made. I wasn't going to fight for a place in her life anymore. I wouldn't beg for scraps of attention or wonder when things would go back to how they used to be. I couldn't sit in this house, in this marriage, feeling like a stranger. I was done being her roommate. For the next few days I did what I always did. I went to work. I came home. I made dinner. But inside, I had already left. Everything felt different now, even though on the surface nothing had changed. Betty still went about her routine, waking up, scrolling through her phone first thing in the morning, sipping her coffee in silence, heading off to work without so much as a real conversation between us. When we were in the same room, we were just occupying space, not actually existing together. She didn't notice when I started to pull away. She didn't see how I spoke less, stopped reaching out, or no longer asked about her day. The coffee I used to make for her every morning? She never even realized when that stopped. Little by little I was removing myself from her life and she never once seemed to notice. And that was my final answer. She didn't care. If she had, she would have noticed. I started planning, checking apartments, figuring out finances, and transferring the money from our joint account into my personal one. There was nothing tying me to this place except my own reluctance to admit that I had been wasting my time. One by one I started packing my things. Not all at once. Just a few things here and there, some clothes, my work essentials, small things she wouldn't immediately notice were gone. I cleared out my side of the closet slowly, taking only what I needed. My books, my personal documents, my laptop, anything that was truly mine. And she never asked why. She didn't even see it happening. The divorce papers had been ready for a while. I had looked into it a while back, long before that night at the party. Maybe a part of me had already known where this was headed, even if I wasn't ready to admit it. Filing wasn't complicated. We had no shared assets, no kids, nothing to fight over. Just years of memories that had already turned to dust. So I signed them. I waited until she was out with her friends. One last night of acting single while she still had a husband in the house. I packed my last bag, took my essentials, and before walking out the door, I put the documents in a simple manila folder and placed them on the kitchen table. I didn't write a note. I didn't leave some long-winded explanation. There was nothing left to say. As my final step, I canceled our joint credit cards. Just like that, there was nothing left connecting us. No finances, no obligations, nothing she could use to pull me back in. She had checked out of this marriage long before I had. I was just the one making it official. No goodbye, no speech, no dramatic confrontation. Just the quiet sound of the door closing behind me. The first night alone felt strange. Not sad, not heartbreaking. Just quiet. And for the first time in a long time I felt peace. Then, the texts started coming. At first, they were casual. Hey, where are you? Then they changed. What is this? Did you file for divorce? Did you cancel the credit cards? We need to talk. She wasn't missing me. She was missing the convenience of having me around. I ignored them all. Until one day I got a longer message. Look, I don't know why you're acting like this, but we need to talk. I feel like you're making this bigger than it is. Can we meet? I agreed. Not because I wanted to fix things, but because I wanted to see if she had finally realized what she had lost. She was already there when I arrived at the coffee shop. She looked different. Uneasy. When she saw me, she forced a smile. Hey. I nodded and sat across from her, waiting. She hesitated. I just feel like this whole thing got blown out of proportion. I exhaled slowly. You think I left because of one thing you said? She blinked. I left because that wasn't a joke. That was how you really saw me. Betty looked away. I didn't mean it like that. I stood up. Take care of yourself, Betty. And for the first time in years, I walked away knowing exactly where I stood. Thank you for watching.